Can you tell that I'm nervous?
Est-ce que tu acceptes de revoir la vidéo que j'ai tournée le soir de l'attentat?
Yes.
Yes, well, I haven't seen it. Is this the whole thing?
Is there sound or is there no sound? Can I stop it? In fact, I still haven't dared watch this video with the sound on. The sound makes me feel something that I don't really like.
When should I start it?
S'il vous plaît, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Hein?
Do you mind if I stop it?
I haven't watched the whole thing in some time. It's tough. It's hard.
Bonjour, bon réveil à tous, bienvenue sur France Culture ce vendredi 13 novembre, c'est la journée de la gentillesse.
Il fera cet après-midi 14 degrés sur la région parisienne, donc ça reste relativement doux pour la saison, mais avec quand même pas mal de nuages.
Eagles of Death Metal, c'est pas vraiment du hard rock, hein. C'est gentil. En tout cas, ils seront en concert au Bataclan à Paris.
The day of November 13th, 2015, I can't really remember the day.
It was the only time that I came into Paris that year. I'm not from here, and I only come very occasionally.
I remember telling my colleagues that I was going to a concert, that it was going to be cool.
We booked our tickets a while ago, me and my best friend, who I always used to go to gigs with. And the Eagles of Death Metal were one of the bands we loved.
I saw them at the Rock on Seine festival, and it wasn't a great concert for me because it wasn't the right setting. So I thought this time it was going to be the good one. I was going to experience the concert in a legendary venue.
I didn't really want to go. It was my wife who insisted, yeah, let's go, I want to see them. I said to her, are you sure? We got home and gave the babysitter a few instructions before we went out. On the bike, I said, are you sure you don't want to have a quiet dinner at a restaurant? She said, no, I want to see them.
I met Magali in front of the Bataclan. We found each other. It was a warm day.
I remember arriving at the Bataclan and thinking, gosh, I almost don't feel like going to a concert. I saw people sitting outside eating their burgers, and it made me want to join them.
When I went in, I said to myself, I'm really going to enjoy the concert. I'm going to stay right at the front.
The concert started.
Heavy music, big sound. Honestly, the band's production was really good. Sounded great.
I go to a lot of concerts, and generally in Paris, if you shout a bit too loudly, people look sideways at you. But the crowd was on fire. It was wild.
It was a great concert. We start dancing and jumping right in the middle, 10 meters from the stage, in the center of the pit.
I was fine because there was a really good atmosphere, but I didn't feel quite right, and I'll never know why.
I was thinking, who the hell are these people throwing firecrackers in a concert hall? Like, there's no respect anymore.
My brain was going really fast. I was thinking, maybe the beer pump exploded. Maybe it's balloons.
We were looking at the projectors, like, did a projector explode?
I don't know why, but at that moment, almost straight away, I grabbed my friend and got both of us down on the ground.
And then all of a sudden, we hit the ground. And there was a sort of panic as the whole room went down as one.
The first wave of shots came straight at us. People were being shot at. And we very quickly fell to the ground. I tried to hold on to my wife as best as I could in the crush. There were people on top of us.
And then I realized that there are guys shooting at people. And I remember that my brain was in this mode like, what is happening is not possible.
You tell yourself it's not possible, that it's really what you think it is, because everyone was in shock.
My wife, she understood right away. She realized straight away that these people wanted to kill us. But it took me a long time. Time seems so stretched out in these situations.
And in fact, I needed to tell my ex-girlfriend several times.
Mag, these are real people with real machine guns. I remember that sentence. I could hear the words, but it felt like a film script.
I spoke to my wife. I told her I loved her. She said, I don't want to die. I want to see the children again.
And then there was a rush of jumbled thoughts, like, damn, there's my cat at home, and no, I can't die here. If I die here, my mother will never get over it.
In the meantime, they were walking around us. There was an intense silence. They were shooting at people. They were killing people. You could hear them walking. You could smell the gunpowder, physically feel the sound of the Kalashnikov. You could really feel it right next to you, I think just above us.
There were people lying on the ground. There was blood. There were screams. There was shooting. There was the smell. The smell was horrible. It was crazy.
Afterwards, once they stopped shooting, when they went past us, I heard a lot of people suffering. I'll never forget it. There were cries and screams for help from people who were suffering.
I remember I didn't want to look at them because I was afraid of meeting their eyes. I thought that that was when they were going to shoot me. As long as I don't meet their eyes, it'll be fine.
I could hear them speaking in French, like you and me. I don't know why. I thought they'd be speaking Arabic if they were terrorists, but that's completely stupid.
There were people who were lucid enough to realize, okay, they're reloading, let's go now. But I was paralyzed, terrorized in the true sense of the word.
For me, it clicked when I saw the person to my left suffocating, spitting blood, choking. And at that moment, my instinct was to crawl away.
I saw everyone rushing towards the exit. I got up with my wife, but she was stunned. She stayed completely on the floor. For me, I had my arm outstretched, and I was standing like this in complete silence. I was like a rabbit. I really could have been shot. I know I blacked out. I ran towards the exit. When I came to my senses, I was wading through the blood on the toilet floor.
We were getting close to the emergency exits, and there were bodies that we had to step over. So we got down on all fours.
I was crawling, holding onto a bag or a shoulder to try and move forward. I lifted my pelvis to crawl, and that was when I got shot in the sciatic nerve in my leg.
I took a bullet through the back of my thigh. The entry point was a tiny hole the diameter of the bullet, but the exit wound was like this in my thigh, and it hit the bone, and my bone shattered into a million pieces. The pain was dreadful. I had no idea that anything could hurt that much.
I remember the very strange feeling of seeing the bullet through my skin. The bullet was intact. We could see it just under my skin at the front of my thigh. I couldn't feel my leg anymore. It was a dead weight. It was super heavy with this immense burning pain. So I got up and I tried to pull my ex by the arms so that at least he would get out of this place.
I remember the emergency exit doors were wide open because people had fallen to the floor. They were holding the doors open. And I remember rolling over them. It was all a blur in my mind. The next thing I know, I'm outside. In the street, beside the pavement, lying down.
And that was when I actually started shouting, calling out to Ruben, because he was in the line of fire, because people were stepping on him. After that, I was screaming for 4 hours, hoping someone would come and rescue us from the street. As far as I can remember, the atmosphere was grim. There were a few screams, but considering the number of people there, it was more like silent agony.
When I came to my senses, I was in the Passage Amelot, but my wife wasn't there. And after a while, I heard, "I'm here." And in fact, my wife had walked past me without me seeing her, probably with a group. So I turned around, and there she was, outside. It's incredible what was going on in my head. I reached out and gave her a big hug. My heart exploded with joy. It's crazy what was happening. It was incredible. Sorry. Yeah, it was pretty intense. I knew I was going to cry.
When I heard the Kalashnikov still going off in the auditorium, I decided not to leave the Bataclan. That was my mistake. I went upstairs. And that's when I found myself even more trapped.
My friend and I found ourselves in a sort of dressing room with a sofa. And then in this dressing room, there was another door leading to a toilet. So we locked ourselves in the toilet. The sound of gunshots continued. I broke through the false ceiling and realized that there was no room to hide in there. There wasn't enough depth. And so we looked at each other. It was a moment suspended in time. We didn't say a word to each other. But we could see in each other's eyes, it looked like the end. We came to our senses, and then we realized that we weren't safe there. So we left the toilet. And then I remembered that window.
The window was open, but it was far too high for me to jump. I weighed up the possibilities of hanging on. I figured that it was either paraplegia or death. So I chose at that moment to hide by trying to get out of that window without actually evacuating from the Bataclan. When I was at the window, it was the second time I thought I'm going to die. The first time was in the pit, where I felt bullets whistling over my head and people died next to me. And the second time was when I decided that the only way out of the Bataclan was feet first. Because I thought, either I let go or the terrorists will find me, in which case I didn't see why they would spare me any more than they had anyone else.
In my mind, we were only on the first balcony. I thought, it's not very high, it's the first floor. I climbed over the railing. And I lowered myself down, trying to get a bit closer to the ground. I was hanging down. At that moment, I realized that it was much too high. There were bins in the street, and I thought, move a dustbin closer to me, it'll break my fall. And I heard people apologizing, saying, I'm sorry, I can't, they're shooting, they're shooting. And in fact, I don't think I was aware of what was happening underneath me in that street. There was a moment where time stopped. I looked down and saw people lying wounded, no longer moving. And then a moment of stillness. No more shouting, no more screaming. A serious moment of silence. And I saw people hiding in doorways. And I was calling out to people, saying, help me, I'm going to fall. The moment I said I was pregnant, I felt really guilty. I thought, fuck, you're playing that card. Yes, I felt guilty for having said that.
She said it so loud. I think the whole street must have heard her.
And so I looked up, and I saw, there on the ledge to my right, 2 people.
When I saw the pregnant woman who'd made the same calculation as me to jump from the window, I said to myself, what courage, she must be really desperate to try something like that.
I think I said, help me, I'm going to let go, I can't hold on anymore.
And that's when I went back inside the Bataclan. I told myself that her life was the priority. At the time, I knew it was going to be difficult. First, because I could only use one arm. I couldn't reach out with both arms because the other arm had to be used for support. And then my arm felt like it was going to give out under the weight of a person hanging in the air.
Seb held out a hand for me to grab.
And so she put her two arms around mine, around my forearm, and then, with superhuman strength, because the adrenaline must have kicked in, I think.
He pulled me up. I managed to climb back over the railing and fan myself back inside.
I managed to pull her up in one go.
And I remember we were looking at each other, and he said, "Wow, you're really strong." And then, a few seconds later, I don't know where he went.
And then she disappeared. She vanished. But it's true that at that moment I had two lives in my hand. In the end, I think it was symbolically powerful that this happened just before I was taken hostage.
Bonsoir, et un journal consacré ce soir à des fusillades dans le centre de Paris. La préfecture annonce au moins 18 morts, le bilan n'est pas encore définitif.
I remember being dazed. You're in a state of shock. I was in pain, really in pain. And I was cold and scared. I was dragged for, I don't know, 20 meters, maybe 30 meters. All the way to the front of a building which was about 20 meters from the Bataclan emergency exit.
When I saw two people dragging ribbon by the arms along the ground, from the middle of the road to their building, I felt such relief to be safe. That was the first time I felt relieved. I was thinking, wow, I'm alive.
Alors vous l'avez dit, le bilan est très provisoire, 15 morts au Bataclan, 18 morts selon la préfecture, et il y aurait une prise d'otages en cours. La police en tout cas a bouclé le périmètre.
On the first floor of the Bataclan, just opposite me, there were a few steps with a ramp and a door. I knocked on the door, trying to be as quiet as possible. And I don't know why, but I thought that my friend was inside. I said, "It's me, it's Charlotte, open up, open up." So someone opened the door. I went in, the door closed, and I found myself in a small room. Plunged into darkness with, I don't know, 15 people who were already there? We heard the terrorists finding people who were hiding. They were probably in the dressing room where I had first taken refuge. And you realize, that's it. They're taking hostages. And then I understood that it was going to last. And then you start to hear them talking.
They explained, we want to avenge the people who died in Syria because of French and American bombs.
And I heard them laughing. I heard them pointing at people, saying to each other, "I got him." And then we hear the terrorists saying, "Get back, get back." They were shooting out of the window. I realized that the police had arrived.
À l'heure où nous parlons, l'assaut est en cours au Bataclan, la salle de concert de l'Est parisien, où se trouveraient plusieurs dizaines d'otages.
The turning point in the evening was when the assault came. When the armed response police arrived, we were both reassured and terrified. We knew all too well that we would be caught in the crossfire. On one side, there was a squad of heavily armed police, and on the other side, there were two terrorists armed with Kalashnikovs and explosive belts who, when they felt threatened, would blow us all up.
I heard them saying, if you come any closer, we'll kill them one by one. We'll throw them out the window.
The assault happened in a split second. The door was smashed in, and then it was mayhem, with the noise and the shrapnel and the bullets. The police were behind a shield. They fired at point-blank range at the terrorists, barely a couple of meters from each hostage. Another one, at the far end, had the team in his sights. It's a miracle I'm still here to talk about it.
We heard a very, very loud explosion, so loud that the walls of the room crumbled, and we were covered in a kind of dust.
By some miracle, the suicide belts detonated towards the ceiling.
And I was thinking, that's it, it's over.
Then I realized that I was miraculously still alive in what looked like a war zone. And then someone pulled me up by the hair and said, "Lift up your shirt, get out of there, raise your hands," to find out if I was a terrorist or not.
And then they made us run out, one after the other.
In fact, it was a sort of corridor of cops yelling at me, saying, "Get out, quickly, quickly, quickly. Don't look around."
I did as I was told. I knew why he was saying that.
We went outside and my wife burst into tears. She couldn't take it anymore. I had to hold her. She went into a massive meltdown.
The evacuation was insane. It was like a war movie. There was a column of wounded in the middle surrounded by armed cops.
I remember the cops. I remember the bodies on the ground.
They had set up a hospital and a bar behind the building.
At the bar, La Royale, I remember that we were marked with numbers on our foreheads for a first triage of the wounded by category. Urgent, critical.
There were lots of wounded lying on the ground. There were dead people too, people who were no longer there.
My friend managed to find me in the avenue. We were completely disoriented. I was barefoot, wearing the survival blanket they gave me. Then I found my partner, who had managed to get through the security cordons.
The first thing that I did when I got out, I was still shirtless. I called my mother, I called my sister, and she called my girlfriend.
I called my mum, then I saw my battery was running low. I suddenly realized she didn't even know I was there. I was worried that when I told her she'd have a heart attack. So I shouted, "Mum, shut up. Are you listening? Ruben and I were at the Bataclan. We're injured, but we're fine."
My wife had been obsessed ever since we were on the ground in the mosh pit. She wanted to see the children again. We had to go home to see the children. And we caught a taxi. I remember we didn't have much change, so we asked him if he could give us a lift for just over 10 euros. The guy took us home.
We met up with all our friends who'd gathered at a friend's place.
Et donc, en fait, ça a été mon premier...
That felt like my first refuge in that moment. I remember them helping me up and saying, "We're going to go get you some socks." Then they saw that I had blood all over me, so I had to go and wash.
me laver.
All our clothes, our shoes, we were covered in blood. It was all over us. And the babysitter was in a panic. She had the TV on.
I immediately felt the need to let out everything that I'd just been through, to talk about what had happened. I told them everything. We all stayed together. I couldn't drink any alcohol because I was pregnant. I remember saying to myself, I'm dreaming of a glass of something just to take the edge off.
In the hours that followed, we spent a lot of time just looking at our children. It was incredible. We looked at them without saying a word. I don't think we've ever said that to the kids. We watched the children sleeping for a long time. We thought, this is fucking unreal. We could have left 3 orphans.
Tir à la Kalachnikov, prise d'otages de masse, attentat suicide coordonné, au moins 120 morts.
C'est donc au Bataclan, salle de spectacle, que l'horreur a dépassé l'entendement. Hier soir, l'attaque la plus sanglante et la plus meurtrière.
One of the most difficult things for me wasn't getting out of that theatre. That was instinct, it just happened. But living with it afterwards, yes. When I got to the hospital, I thought, I'm fine, I'm alive. I just let go. I've taken a bullet or 2, but I'm alive. I felt really strong. I felt indestructible then.
I think it was a junior resident who operated on me. They put a rod into the marrow of my femur with 2 screws near the knee and 1 screw near the hip, and my bone rebuilt itself around it.
Ruben and I went to the rehabilitation center 2 weeks later.
Our friends organized a shared calendar. They blocked out the days so that they didn't all come at the same time. So we had friends coming to visit us all the time. We didn't have to deal with anything. This whole period was very pleasant for us.
And then suddenly, you're outside. You return to your home, which you no longer recognize. I remember leaving the rehabilitation center was really brutal. I didn't know what to do. I felt totally alone. I could hardly take 3 steps. I couldn't go from my kitchen to my living room carrying a tray because I was on crutches. Sometimes I couldn't pick up my socks. I couldn't put them on. I had to wait for my body to allow me to do a bit of hoovering, to take a shower. All those basic everyday things you don't usually have to think about. I had to wait for my body to allow me to do those things.
My wife and I were psychologically devastated. We went to the psychologist together.
The healing began when I contacted a psychologist. I had the feeling that I had been a bit of a sacrificial victim for the country, that there'd been a lack of protection, that there'd been negligence, even indifference, and I was very angry. I felt that there was a direct link between this attack and the actions of my country, of France on the international stage. And I started to think that the terrorists had good reasons to do what they did. And that first shrink helped me to make the difference between the terrorist feelings of wanting to get justice and their methods, which only added fuel to the fire.
My reaction was to cut myself off from everything that could be said, seen, or heard about the 13th of November.
I went back to work in September 2016, at the start of the new school year, since I was a school teacher. I had to get back into my job from before the attack, but there were tons of things going on in my head at the same time that I didn't even know how to explain, questioning the meaning of life. Because it's all very well for me to know that I got lucky, but what should I be doing with my life now?
Caro and I went back to work quite quickly. I had a shoot in the 11th arrondissement. It was incredible, walking through the streets of the 11th, going past the Bataclan. It was crazy. My photographs weren't the best. I was in front of the Bataclan. If you look, you can see I was shaking a lot.
I wanted to go back to work. I wanted to get back on track. I had to take public transport again. I absolutely wanted to face the metro, the crowds. I have to admit that I had my moments of stress. All it took was someone shouting or the metro braking unexpectedly. And there I was, imagining the worst straight away.
I saw a dark-skinned guy in a puffer jacket and started panicking. So many times on public transport, I was sweating, in tears, convinced I was going to die.
C'est un procès hors norme qui s'ouvre aujourd'hui. Les victimes et leurs proches vont replonger dès aujourd'hui et pour 9 mois dans l'horreur du 13 novembre 2015.
Un procès pour les victimes, un procès filmé aussi pour l'histoire.
For a long time, I was torn. There was a part of me that wanted to attend the trial, to see how it unfolded.
Voir comment ça se déroulait.
Then another side of me that had kept everything to do with the 13th of November at a distance from the start.
I didn't testify at the trial. I stayed very far away from the trial. I didn't feel like going. I feel like I wanted to move on, and going to the trial was going back.
The only time I wanted to go, I had work to do. Anyway, I didn't see much point in going. The guys are dead.
I knew I wanted to testify, and it was a lot of pressure, because I was still very upset about the grey areas that remained. We only saw the foot soldiers, because it was only the foot soldiers on trial. The torturers weren't there, they were already dead, and above all, we didn't have the brains of the operation before us.
The only time I went to the trial was because Seb was giving evidence. And I ended up taking a quick look at the doc. And what I said to myself during all the time I spent in that courtroom was, how could such ordinary people have such a huge impact on hundreds of people, a whole country? It didn't make sense.
I'd prepared what I was going to say. After 4 lines, I looked up at the defendants and started to look around and really tell what I had experienced from the inside. And the trial allowed me to testify. And afterwards, I felt like a weight had been lifted.
For me, the trial was mainly about listening to other people's testimonies. It was healing for me. I needed to know how other people were doing.
My daughter was born in June 2016, 7 months after the attacks. When she was born, I still had moments when things weren't going well. I never suppressed my grief, my anxieties, even though, of course, I tried to protect her. And then, as she grew up, I wondered how I was actually going to talk to her about it, because I didn't want it to be a secret. I wanted it to be a subject that was there, that existed. So it's never been taboo. I told her, for example, I was going to be interviewed for a documentary today. And she said, but what are you going to say if they ask you how you're doing today? And I told her I'd say I was fine, but that it was difficult to find the right words. She said, you're coping, you know. So I said to myself, that's how it is now.
Charlotte, she was there at a time when I had no hope of getting out of there alive. This moment where I had two lives in my hands stayed with me through my healing process. Somehow this pregnant woman, Charlotte, is someone, she's like a sister, as if we have the same blood. She's very important to me, even if we see each other very little.
Caro and I decided to get married straight away, even though we're punks, and we don't give a fuck about marriage. We've lived, got out of hell, that's it for me. I came out of that passage and it's clearly a rebirth. Yes, of course, it united us, that's clear.
We tend to think that in the face of adversity or trauma, you come together and get through it together. But that's not necessarily true. It can also separate you. You don't always experience things in the same way and at the same speed.
We tried to save our relationship, but just after the attacks, it became clear that it wasn't going anywhere. We were separated by bullets somehow.
For me, this footage is important for the record because without them, there wouldn't be anything concrete. I'm well aware that other survivors didn't take it well, that they felt it was voyeuristic.
Yes, I was angry with you, but not with you. I was angry with the person who filmed it. But I was angry because somehow it robbed me of the announcement of my pregnancy. Lots of people who didn't know about it yet.
The footage is part of history. It's evidence.
It's a document. It's precious. It gives a sense of reality to what happened.
It's good that this testimony exists, so we never forget.
Ciel bariolé, les étoiles dansent. Sur le parquet, la fête commence. Vendredi soir, plein de mystères. Vendredi noir, ombre et lumière. Vendredi soir, les lumières de la vie. Vendredi noir s'envole.